First-time winner yesterday, Formula One's undisputed king of 2023 was the class of the field once again today. Welcome back to episode number 337 of Grid Talk. Today we are here to discuss the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix. My name is George Howson, and joining me today we have Phil Mathew of the Grip Strip podcast.
Hello.
Rachel Kapusta of the Paddock Pals podcast.
Hello.
And Jonah Gould of the Soft Tire podcast.
Hello.
But before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And today, Jonah, unfortunately, we're going to start with Ferrari, who got off to quite a poor start today, or in Carlos Sainz's case, not a start at all. He didn't start the race because of a fuel issue, I believe. Charles Leclerc, though, bringing on the points, got 10 points today for fifth place. Very mixed bag for them today, but given the pace of the car, I think, given that only one car actually started the race, that's probably the best they could have hoped for today.
Yeah, I think, Ferrari, I'm not going to say is underwhelming, but in the last little stretch, they've been not pulling in the points that they could. It's a real shame that Carlos didn't start the race today. I mean, we've seen all season, and this is going to be a very controversial opinion to all the Charles stands out there. Carlos has been the better driver all year, in my opinion, and it's a real shame that they didn't put the better car out there. Obviously, to no fault of their own, there's a fuel issue going on there, and that's okay. But Charles brought home the points he could. It's a good place for that Ferrari. You could see him kind of getting walked around by the McLarens a little bit, which, for me is nice to see. But for Ferrari fans, it's just not what they're looking for. But overall, I think, Charles did what he could. It's a real shame they didn't have both cars in the race today, but good on him for getting P5 and getting 10 points for the Maranello outfit. I think it was good, but everyone knows that they can do better.
Yeah, Ferrari, of course, chasing that second place in the Constructors' Championship behind Mercedes. Unfortunately for them, they didn't make up any ground today when it could have been potentially better, especially with what happened to the Mercedes, but we'll get onto them eventually. Next up, we've got Williams, Rachel. Again, Logan Sargent today actually retiring because I believe he was ill and was really struggling. A lot of drivers today struggling in the heat. It looked very, very tough for them around this track that has a lot of high-speed corners, and we will speak about that some more soon. But Alexander Albon down in 13th, disappointing for him. I mean, we thought maybe Williams could have done something today with how fast the track was, but the pace just wasn't in the car today.
Yeah, so first with Logan, I just felt really bad for him and him getting sick. He wanted to stick it out. He really wanted to try, even though he was running in last place. And I think for him, it probably comes from a place of desperation and trying to keep that seat because he really is under a lot of pressure. They seem to want to keep him from what I can tell. But yeah, you got to finish the race. But yeah, it was incredibly hard conditions. So no shame in him having to retire. He was literally, I think they said he threw up in his helmet, which is, I wouldn't want to drive around with the heat plus throw up in my helmet. So I understand that. Alex, though, he did have some good moves throughout the race, so it was good to see. And I always hope for points for him, but it wasn't in the cards for them today. You thought it might be with some of the track limits stuff coming up because you're just like, well, what if he gets it? And I also love when James is on the wall with the team principal because he actually gives insight. So when he's talking on the wall, I love it because he'll tell it how it is. Everyone else will beat around the bush. And so that was another great Williams member that we got to hear about today.
Yeah, I got to really feel for Logan Sargent, to be honest, because, we say it all the time on the podcast, to go out there and drive a Formula One car is an incredible physical effort. And to do that in the heat today, while feeling awful, like I think most of us, if we had whatever Logan Sargent's got, we'd probably just chill at home and just try and recover. But he's put himself out there and he tried to do the race. Credit to him and credit to his team as well for, being so open and being like, you know what, we get it. There's no shame in, not continuing here. It's absolutely fine. And I'm sure there's some people that might disagree with that, but I think it's it's pretty cut and dry at the end of the day. If you're not fit to drive the car, you shouldn't be out there. Unfortunately, after 40 laps or so today, that was not the case for Logan Sargent. Next up, Phil, we're going to talk about Mercedes. Again, a very mixed bag for them today. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell colliding in the first corner. Of course, I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are on that. For me, it was a pretty slam dunk in terms of who was to blame for that one. But despite George Russell going down to back of the field, he ended up recovering to fourth place by the end. That car had some serious pace in it. Whether it was just him trying to make up for what happened or just a general abundance of pace in the car, I'm not sure. But either way, great result in that regard. And of course, like I mentioned, they actually gained on Ferrari today, which not many people would have expected.
Yeah, it's what might have been in the case of George Russell and even in the case of Lewis Hamilton. Hail Mary move to try and get that position early in the race in turn one, trying to use those soft tires, knowing he was going to have to pit probably 8 laps into the race. 3-1 had not worked all the way through the weekend, and it was yet another example of that. Certain segments of the fan base will take joy in that, but as a Lewis fan, I don't take any joy in seeing points go away, going in when you're trying to battle for second in the drivers' championship, and you have the guy that's second in the drivers' championship stepping on himself constantly. They had pace in the race car. He had yesterday came from the tail of the field essentially to fifth in the sprint race in 19 laps. So the notion is, even on a not ideal strategy, I think Lewis could have maximized points, gotten a top 5 finish out of it. I feel like, based on the way that George was racing, once Toto told him to be quiet, he was racing about as best as anybody out there that wasn't the one car. And so they probably had 2 cars that could finish in the top 5 today, and instead they only got 1. Yes, they gain on Ferrari because, of course, the smooth operator wasn't out there or didn't lose ground, but it's really a loss. I mean, it's a racetrack that, of course, Lewis dominated at 2 years ago. It's a track that really suits his style, but I think even in his case and the way he was in his post incident comments to the media, you could tell that he knew that he probably pushed it over the line. But unlike other people, he at least copped to it and owned it. It's unfortunate, but at least in the case of Mercedes, the damage limitation worked out to be that they were able to get a decent day out of it. And Lewis gets to go to Coda, which is one of his best racetracks, one of his favorite racetracks, in a couple of weeks to make up for a rare mistake that he had there today.
Yeah, I think that Hamilton has had a very good season this season on the whole, but today was absolutely not his day. When the incident first happened, I did think, whose fault is that? Who's done that? And I looked at the replays and I thought that's 100% Hamilton's fault. And I don't know if it's been decided yet, but I remember that he was under investigation after the race for crossing the racetrack during the race. After he crashed out, he ended up crossing over the circuit. So I don't know what punishment he's going to get for that. Probably some kind of fine, and I'm pretty sure he can afford it, to be honest. But anyway, we move on. Next up, Jonah, are the AlphaTauri drivers. I mean, obviously this season has really not been their season. Bottom of the Constructors' Championship, despite some better races recently. Again, today was absolutely not their day. Yuki Tsunoda 15th, Liam Lawson 17th. They were running in the points at times, but like a few cars we're going to speak about, just no pace overall, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, Red Bull shouldn't have a sister team, because that's basically taking one team out of, the championship fight when you're looking farther at the top. This year, I'm not going to say is a perfect example of that, but that car is nowhere close to competitive, let alone even for points. We've seen Liam Lawson, who is astoundingly showing off what he's got, bringing that car as close to the points as possible. But, when your cars for the majority of the season are scoring less points than you're using drivers, it's really not a good look. and it's just got no pace in it. You know, Yuki Tsunoda, he's shown flashes of brilliance this season and the seasons before when he's had a car that can fight in the points and that can go for, let's say P4, like he finished in Abu Dhabi 2021. But, you know, today it's just not their day. You're sticking a car on a track that these drivers really don't have a ton of experience with, as well as a car that's just plain awful. It's really not a good combination that they're going with there. We'll see Daniel Ricciardo back in the car for the US next week, which will be nice to see what he can do with it. It's truly a shame Liam Lawson's not going to get more time in a car next season. As far as we know, I think we'll see him back on the grid in 2025, no doubt. But that AlphaTauri is just underwhelming. It's really slow. It's got no pace. It's not good in fast-paced corners. It's not good in slow-speed corners. It's draggy down the straights. There's just no benefit to this AlphaTauri car. And I think at this point, they're just trying to finish out the next 5 races and look forward to 2024 when either they have a new name on it or they have a lot more RB19 parts on it.
Yeah, they'll be looking to put this season firmly behind them. They were probably looking forward to potentially overtaking Haas or Alfa Romeo, but after Alfa Romeo's results today, that's looking very unlikely. They had a great day. We'll get onto them shortly, though. But normally I give Haas as the American team too, Phil, as usually resident American on the show. However, Rachel, it's your turn this time. It looked as though Hülkenberg maybe could have scored points today, but then unfortunately, something had to happen. He went in the wrong grid slot because of Carlos Sainz not starting the race, got a penalty, and that put paid to any hope of points they really had. I mean, you maybe thought with the limit on stints that Haas could have eked the tyres out because the tyres have just been so difficult for them this season. But even then, they just fell through the field, really.
Yeah, typical Haas for this season. I just wonder how long Gunther will even be there. I know he's a great personality, but I don't know if he's a very good team principal. The team has just made no strides. And even today with Kevin during the race, them suggesting a certain setting on the car and him being like, no, that's crap. So obviously there's internal turmoil, but I don't have many nice things to say about Haas. Nico Hülkenberg's hair looked nice in his press interviews. That's a plus. In Nico, he always seems to qualify really well, but that car has 0 race pace, and it's just underwhelming. I don't even consider them the American team, but I guess they are in fact the American team, but I don't like to own that. I'll take Logan Sargent, who doesn't know what a kilometer is, ahead of Haas. How about that? But yeah, not much else to say. I don't think we'll see anything more from them this season. I think we'll see more of the same, and they'll be super predictable that they'll keep sucking. And that's all I have to say.
They've been excommunicado from the US. Unfortunately, they've been that bad that even their own citizens don't want to own them. However, you'll have choice soon because of the news with Andretti coming through that they're going to potentially join Formula One, and I really hope it happens. I really hope that the other teams don't vote them out. But we'll see with that. Formula One, like I've said many times, is a cartel, particularly when it comes to the teams. They've got their pie and they don't want to share it with anybody else. They want 10 slices. They don't want 11. Simple as that. But we'll see. I hope I'm wrong on that one. But yeah, 14th and 16th today for Haas with Magnussen and Hülkenberg. Better though for Alpine, Phil, at least for one of their drivers anyway. Pierre Gasly, I can't remember if it was him or no, it was Ocon back in Bahrain who got loads of penalties. Gasly got a load of them today. I think he got 3, maybe 4 time penalties for track extensions. It was a lot. They just kept flashing up. I thought, oh, maybe they've just repeated that by mistake, but no, they're all independent penalties. So he was down in 12th. Ocon, though, getting 7th, getting a few points for Alpine. It's not the worst day for them, but honestly, the amount of penalties that Gasly was getting for track extension was just making me laugh.
I mean, you got to give them credit, George, that both of their cars finished. Usually one of them falls out every race. So yes, they got a lot of penalties for time for track limits, but both cars finished. So baby steps for Alpine. They have the Andretti thing maybe coming along, so that's also a win. But yeah, when you consider all the argy-bargy that was going on, that they couldn't have gotten both cars into the points as a loss. Gasly kind of driving over his head, but he wasn't the first person or wouldn't be the last really the way that the whole entire race went. I mean, it's just I think yesterday during the sprint, maybe had a little bit more to show for that, but they didn't really. I mean, I just want to go back there. I mean, they had Gasly ended up finishing 9th, and the Ocon was out of the race on lap 10. That was in that incident with Hulkenberg and Checo. So in this case, Ocon is able to go and recover and run out the race today after what has been kind of a shoddy weekend. I mean, it's I guess that damage limitation thing we always talk about, but in the end, it's Alpine. They're 6th in the Constructors' Championship, and that's where they're going to be. So we'll see what they bring to the table for the last few Grand Prix of the season, but really it's a curiosity to see if they'll be able to have both of their cars finish every race. So the fact that they had that even through hilarity is a win, I guess, for them.
Yeah, it is something at the end of the day. They did both manage to finish the race, of course, but yeah, I mean they're just kind of in their own zone in the Constructors' Championship. They're 6th, they're miles behind McLaren, they're miles ahead of Williams. They're just doing their own thing. They could not enter for the rest of the season and they'd still finish 6th. So they're just doing whatever they need to do at the end of the day. Now we're going to talk about Aston Martin next. Fernando Alonso absolutely drove the wheels off his car today. You cannot fault his amount of effort that he put in today's event. He could have got potentially better than the 6th place that he ended up getting. I think he was running in 3rd for part of it, but I think, to be honest, he was probably overdriving the car just to try and compensate. Lance Stroll down in 11th. Now, obviously, I know that Rachel has disowned the Haas team. I'm pretty sure Jonah disowned Lance Stroll a long time ago as a Canadian. But we have to talk about him this weekend. It's one thing to not perform in the car, Jonah, but it's another thing to literally assault your personal trainer after qualifying. And I know we've spoke about it in qualifying. We spoke about it in the sprint show as well. But, you know, you can be a bad driver, but to do that is just unforgivable, you know. And the only way you can get away with it is the fact he's the boss's son.
Yeah. You know what? As a Canadian, the flag says it all. I mean, we don't condone that. That's the most un-Canadian thing I've ever seen. You know, people always say, kind of, you know, straying a little bit away from Formula One, people always say the Canadians are super nice and, you know, they always apologize. And you know, that's a stereotype that follows the country. It's very true. It really is true. As someone who's lived here my entire life, which isn't very long, I'm only 21, but you know, it's very true. And what we saw out of Lance after qualifying is so uncharacteristically not Canadian that my mom and I are sitting there and we're just in complete shock that had happened. I mean, we're not in shock that he sucks behind the wheel of a Formula One car. I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. He's not a good driver. You know, he's there. His dad owns the team. It's nepotism. There's no other way to cut it. He was good in the junior categories. He gets behind the wheel of a Formula One car and he's just nowhere close to the driver he was. I mean, we saw flashes of brilliance like Turkey in 2020 behind the wheel of the Racing Point when he got pole. And, you know, it was nice to see someone drape the Canadian flag over themselves as a sign of success, but he's just been so underwhelmingly bad this season that there's no excuses left for why he's performing so poorly. His attitude, you can see I think he's checked out. I truly think that he wants nothing to do with it anymore. The Aston Martin has gone backwards in terms of progression, although, you know, Fernando Alonso is disgustingly good and will always be incredible and one of the greats of the sport. But I think Lance has just checked out. And I think it's about time Lawrence, you know, puts the team up for sale and you know, as much as I don't like to say it because it's nice to have a Canadian flag in the sport now that the GOAT's gone, I think it's time to give that seat to someone who's a little bit more deserving. I mean, we've seen their driver academy. We've seen Felipe Drugovich. We've seen some of those guys that can get behind the wheel and that can do well. I think it's about time that one of them gets the opportunity to get behind the wheel and do well. Fernando Alonso did great. I mean, that car is not quick, not as quick as it used to be. We saw some uncharacteristically Fernando mistakes in this race, like when he drove off at turn 15, gust of wind, whatever it might be. It's not very Fernando of him, but I think it's time for Aston Martin to do some serious restructuring in terms of ownership and in terms of driver, not drivers, because Fernando's immortal. He'll race forever. But I don't think that seat is for Lance. And you know what? The entire country we're just not backing him, especially after that decision in qualifying to physically shove your trainer. I get frustration. Throw something, throw your helmet, don't throw the steering wheel, throw your gloves, do something like that. Do not in any way touch someone who works for the team. It's just unacceptable. And Lance needs to issue a public apology at the minimum. That's the bare minimum.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. No, very well said. And yeah, it's just not on at the end of the day. You can't be doing that. And you rightly point out as well that drivers like Felipe Drugovich are itching to be in a Formula One seat. They'd do anything to be in there. Yes, you could say, oh, Drugovich might be a pay driver or whatever, of course. But end of the day, he's not had his chance in Formula One. He's got so close. He nearly started the first race of this season, and he's hungry and he wants to be in that seat. And you compare that to Lance Stroll, who, let's be honest, only drives for that team because he's the boss's son. Simple as that. And he's giving petulant, angry interviews where sometimes his only response is a four-lettered word beginning with S. I'm not going to repeat. It's just not on. What kind of example is that setting? It's like you got people desperate to be in Formula One, and then one of the guys that is just not giving a crap. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, we've commented about Lance Stroll a lot, obviously, on this show, including myself. But yeah, let's move on to a good news story today, though, Rachel. Alfa Romeo, double points today. Bottas in 8th, Guan Yu Zhou in 9th. We didn't think it had happened. It's been ages since they've scored points. Mid-season sometime. For Canada, actually, I'm just looking at the results here. Italy was the last time they scored points. It's not been that long, but aside from that, it's been like mid-season last time they actually scored points. Huge for them. And it's got them ahead of Haas in the Constructors' Championship, which I don't think many people saw coming, really.
Mm-hmm. It was awesome today to see them both in the points. Zhou getting promoted into the points, but it is still a great effort from them, and they brought some really great updates for their car. It's kind of a tough weekend to see everything that those upgrades can do because not a lot of practice time to get the data, but they're going to bring even more upgrades next week, and they have plans for later in the season as well. It's late in the game, but it's always great to see a team make a change that actually works, and it's always great to see Bottas do well. I miss him from the Mercedes years, and I just always root for him. And also Zhou getting to show his talent in a car that is actually drivable, because it's tough when you're starting your Formula One career in a car that you're not able to show what you can do. So I think if this Alpha keeps getting better, we'll get to see more of his talent and his skill, and if he's really going to stick around in F1 for a long time. But I'm excited for them. It was a great day. I didn't see it coming. I really didn't. And so it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, a few people were saying that, this Qatar track, it really suits the Alfa Romeo car. And even then you thought, it's still going to be a stretch to get points. They've not looked good in recent weeks, but fair play to them. Both the drivers and the team have come in for a lot of criticism recently. But today, I think that really showed what the car can do when it's hooked up properly around the track. Just going to go and mention before we go further into the order that if you are enjoying this podcast, we'd love it if you left a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. 5-star review really helps us out there. And if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go and subscribe there. We're going out live right now. So if you're joining us on the live stream, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Ring the bell icon so you can get all of the updates from the show. And you can also go over to our social medias as well, which are now at Grid Talk UK, everywhere on the @ symbol, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the lot. We're on all of them. So go and check us out on those. Let's go next to Red Bull, Phil. Now, obviously, another mixed day for them. Verstappen winning today looked fairly comfortable. McLaren's actually chasing him down quite a bit at the end, but you felt that he was probably just relatively coasting towards the end. But obviously, I have my bet, so I do feel a bit more invested in this, but I am so disappointed with Perez again today. Yes, he started from the back. However, you had George Russell getting hit by Lewis Hamilton, getting a damaged car, changed his front wing. Apparently, there was more damage on the car. Ted Kravitz was saying in the pit lane, oh, yeah, they're going to retire the car. He's done. And then he ended up pulling out of the pit. So obviously, he was all right. Still, that car would have had some damage on it. But George Russell ends up going from last to 4th. Perez only just broke into the top 10 in the fastest car on the grid. now they're only 11 points behind Aston Martin in that battle for fourth place in the constructors. It's looking very, very good for the team in Papaya.
Yeah, it's a dream. I'll put it that way. I posted a picture today on Twitter of my friend who's a Mercedes fan leaning in front of the TV, pointing at the, like the card that has all the standings on it from Bahrain, where Lando was 20th. And he's pointing at that. And I tweeted it today and I said, well, this aged well, didn't it? Because, going back to Rachel's point about seeing upgrades on a car actually work, oh my God, did these upgrades on the McLarens work? Unbelievable. It is unbelievable that this car, I don't care if it looks just like a Red Bull. I don't care if that's where the ideas came from. This car is fast, and it has two really, really talented drivers in it. For the first time, I'm sorry, Carlos was good, but for the first time, we have someone who's really sticking the fight to Lando. This car is quick. This car is good at basically any track. It's good around slow speed corners. It's better around fast paced corners. It's not draggy in the straights. It's really slick. This car is quick. You know what? It's just so nice to see, even doing this with an external wind tunnel, bringing the parts back and forth from Germany at Toyota's wind tunnel. The same wind tunnel that did the Mark V Supra is building a car that goes around a racetrack this fast and is only 4 seconds behind Max Verstappen in probably the most dominant Formula One car of all time if it keeps going at this rate, which the only car it'll beat is a McLaren. But it's unbelievable seeing the trek of this team going from not making it into Q2 in Bahrain to, Oscar winning a sprint race. This kid's a rookie. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that this was unexpected and it came out of nowhere. He won Formula 3 in his rookie year. He won Formula 2 in his rookie year. This is not unexpected. The kid is unbelievable. As if I'm not mistaken, as Philip said, it's probably the best rookie we've seen since Lewis Hamilton. He's incredible behind the wheel of that car. Lando, yes, made a decent amount of mistakes this weekend. I'm not going to sit here and be a Lando stan and say he was perfect, because he wasn't. Made a decent amount of mistakes. Oscar outdrove him all weekend. He deserved that second more than Lando did until, Lando decided he remembered how to go really fast in the last 3 laps of the race. But it's nice seeing that car being competitive and beating the Aston Martin, and the developments are working and the upgrades are working. If this is the package they start off with in 2024, I think our title fight will be a lot closer than it is this year.
I know, it's like you said, it's a dream, isn't it? It's been so long since McLaren have actually managed to fight for a title. Over 10 years now. 2012 was the last time they even got close to it. It's very, very optimistic into 2024. But with how bad McLaren have been at the start of the last 2 seasons, I'm being very, very careful with what I say. But right now, they are undisputed the second fastest team on the grid. Like, absolutely. It's not even that close, really. I mean, I know Russell had his problems today, but 30 seconds behind Norris in third place. That's a huge gap. So yeah, those are the 20 drivers and the 10 teams. Do want to give a mention, though, because there's obviously a few things have happened this weekend. Do want to give a mention to some of these. So obviously we had the tyre troubles this weekend. We had tyre troubles 2 years ago in Qatar as well. But this weekend it got announced that every driver would only be able to do up to 18 laps during the race, just for safety concerns. I don't think the FIA has ever done this before. This is a completely new thing. And my question to you, Rachel, is, was that the right thing to do? And quite frankly, should we be racing here? Because this is a circuit that we've signed on now for quite a few years with F1. And we had these problems with punctures 2 years ago. We had the concerns this year as well. Is this track suited to Formula One cars?
Very loaded question with a lot of different parts. So I'll start by saying that I think the regulations of only 18 laps on new tires and plus even less laps on used tires that they ended up allocating as well, it took away a lot of the excitement of watching the drivers like push these tires till the end. They might have felt like they could go longer than 18 laps, and that wasn't even an option. They had to pit, and it was kind of weird knowing like, oh, well, this driver's going to pit on this lap. Like, it was a little bit weird knowing that. I guess one thing that was good is the drivers could push really hard on these tires. So we saw people going absolutely full out, putting in qualification laps almost, just getting everything they could out of these tires because they knew that everyone was level and everyone would have to change tires. Like, George Russell, I mean, he had such a good drive today. Like every lap, he kept making that one overtake on like turn 6, I think it was, which was like without DRS. So it was just really impressive to watch them push to the edge. And so that aspect was good, but it took away a lot of like driving crafts and nursing tires versus pushing and driving at different deltas, which maybe people wouldn't think is what F1 should be. F1 should be constantly pushing on the edge every single lap. That's how it used to be. And now there's a lot of rules about nursing your tires and different deltas. And okay, this lap we're doing cool down. And so it is different now, but it was exciting to see. As for the track, I wasn't a fan of it 2 years ago when all of that stuff was happening, and I didn't think we should race there. But the alternative was that street course that they were talking about as well. And I wasn't so crazy about that idea either. So it's fine with giving this track another chance. I think they have to make changes for next year. It's just not, we can't have this rule be a norm. It's what the sport should be about, in my opinion. But I think they're gonna have to make the changes. I looked at the curves and they looked like pointy, and I was like, how are they driving over those? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So I think we can race here again next year and the years to come, but they need to make changes to the circuit. Right now it's not meant for F1. F1 doesn't race there. The track barely gets used all year. It's just like a couple of races here and there. So I think that they have the time to make the changes, and they definitely should if they want to keep this on the calendar. It's exciting. It's full out, all these turns, but if the tires that we use at all the other tracks can't work here, then definitely changes need to be made.
Yeah, I know there's a few nuances to the questions I asked there, but yeah, it's a complicated issue at the end of the day, and it's something that a lot, we've not really seen anything like it since the fabled and infamous 2005 US GP. And today's solution was far better than the one we had 18 years ago. So there is that, of course. And as well, Phil, I'm going to ask you about it too, your kind of take on it. At the end of the day, it's better to be safe than sorry about these things. But again, it's like they've made these, like Rachel pointed out, the curbs around this track, like, I wouldn't really want to run my road car over them. They look like they just shred your tires. And you've got cars doing some incredibly high speeds. Like some of the corners, like there were so many track extensions today because of how fast you can take some of these corners. But drivers were just willing to make that risk. But I suppose one upside of all this is that it was like the refueling days. You had cars just going out and absolutely gunning it for 18 laps. So that was something we've not seen for a long time.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, I agree with Rachel in terms of we didn't have what we usually see, which is actually something nice, because it's kind of gotten to be pretty predictable. At least, I mean, yes, we knew what the pits, the sequences were going to be. The only thing was what tires everybody had, and what do you call Ted basically, without a black marker earlier in the preview, was telling everybody what everybody had earlier in the race, or earlier in the preview of the Grand Prix. But I think the flat out aspect of this racetrack is really cool. It's something that we don't see very often in Formula One, unless it's really, really, really edgy. Now, the edgy part of it with this track, one is the lack of usage, as Rachel brought up, and I also think I brought up in the preview, the lack of usage, these curbs, because these curbs, they built this track for MotoGP. MotoGP has been there forever. They've run World Superbikes there for many, many years. So granted, you need to make changes or adjustments for the cars versus the motorcycles. But I also look at it relative to what these cars are able to do. 2 years ago, I don't know what kind of power they had, ultimate power they had in those cars relative to these cars, but I think they're equal-ish, if not maybe more, with the amount of downforce they're creating and stuff. So now they're so much more on the edge, and you're having to be on those curbs because otherwise you're going to wipe yourself out or go into the sand. Yeah, you're going to be hitting those curbs at a high rate. These new tires, yes, we've seen some issues with them. I mean, Pirelli's going to be around for another 4 or 5 years, so they have to figure out something. But also, Qatar's got plenty of money. They had no problem buying themselves onto the grid. They can, as Rachel says, they have to make changes. I agree. They have to make changes and make the place safer. Then because we don't need to have massive offs, we don't need to have incidents of yesteryear take place at 5, 6, 100G, like 100G crashes going into whatever because because of curbs. It's perfectly doable. They have plenty of money to do it, and they're going to have to do it. Now, what the other thing they need to change is not have it as a sprint weekend. They need to have it as a regular race weekend with regular running. Frankly, maybe add an extra session, or maybe have Formula 3 race there perhaps as another race, because Formula 3 season is so condensed. Why don't you just have them run there and have their final race, since they take 8 months to end the Formula 2 season between the Italian Grand Prix and then going to Abu Dhabi. That might be an option to go and add more rubber to the racetrack. But I mean, we'll see about that, and we'll go from there. But I personally think, for minus all the questionable stuff that involves Qatar, the track itself, I think, is a cool track for Formula One cars. But there is plenty of things they could change to make it better.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue for sure, and it's something that needs to be sorted out before the race next year. But if you want to let us know what you think about the Qatar circuit, how you think this weekend went, let us know in the comments on the YouTube video. Let us know on the socials at Grid Talk UK, like I mentioned before. And now it's time to give our driver of the days. I'm not actually sure one driver of the day today, but I'm going to give it to George Russell. I think getting hit by his teammate and then recovering from last all the way to fourth, very impressive today. He showed some incredible pace at times. Although I will give a mention to the fact that my driver of the weekend is Oscar Piastri, winning his first race in the sprint, obviously, and second place today again, even despite getting demoted down to sixth. After his qualifying lap was deleted. I think he was fantastic this weekend, and I can't believe he's 21 or whatever, and doing what he's doing in his first season. Yeah, very, very exciting prospect for sure. Jonah, who's your driver of the day today?
Well, since you said George Russell, I'm going to say Oscar Piastri. I mean, the kid's he's like 21 or 22. It's unbelievable what he's doing. He won a sprint race, which I think it's kind of funny because Formula One keeps posting everywhere like, oh, it's a first-time race winner, but I don't think McLaren or Oscar count it until he wins an actual Grand Prix, not a sprint race. Because Oscar's what he said over the radio after he won the sprint race was super underwhelming if that's your first win. You'd probably be a little bit more excited. So I don't think him or McLaren actually count it. But I'd say Oscar. I mean, he's 21 or 22. The kid's unbelievable. It's just what he's doing is unreal. You walk into McLaren, you start beating Lando Norris, guy who we've seen outdrives the machinery he's been given every year. I got to give it to Oscar. And this is a little bit biased, but the guy's unreal.
Perhaps, yeah. But the thing is, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. He's doing a fantastic job. Rachel, who's your driver of the day today?
I'm going to go George as well. I feel like he just had such a good recovery drive, and it's worth the vote of driver of the day. He couldn't make it work at the end with the soft tires, but everything he'd done to that point was already just amazing and really impressive. Giving it to George Russell.
Fair enough. Phil, who's your driver of the day?
I'm going to go with Jonah. I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri because it's making, I think you mentioned it earlier too, that he's the first guy that's really came into McLaren and really pushed Lando. I mean, yeah, him and Carlos are besties and all, so that was great, but it was a different time and a different level for those two with McLaren. Now they're up front and they're racing for up at the top end of this grid, and you're talking about a guy who was being fought over by multiple teams, and now we see why. He has things he needs to improve on, but this weekend was, from start to finish, one of probably his best weekends so far. And I think that this is scratching the surface of his potential and capability. And I'm sure that the guy who won the race wouldn't be smiling as much if he had to race him week to week like that. And I think that's something that hopefully we can see in 2024. Fingers crossed on that, because that team, McLaren, as you said, George, it's been a decade, or it'll be more than a decade, 11 years since they've been in a championship race, really. So seeing a classic organization come back to the fore in Formula One, and this time would be a great thing. And Oscar Piastri is a big part of why that's going to be the case.
Yeah, he is absolutely the future of that team, and the present for that matter. He's delivering results right now as well. So yeah, fantastic for him there. 2 votes for Russell, 2 votes for Piastri for driver of the day. So I want to give my panelists a chance to plug their outlets as well. Jonah, I mentioned that you are part of the Soft Tire podcast. What is that, and where can people find it?
Well, the Soft Tire podcast is basically a podcast with 3 guys and occasionally George, who like to just talk about anything and everything. It starts with Formula One, about 10 minutes worth, and then we get distracted. One of my favorite episodes, if you want to check it out, you can find it also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts, is when we had George on and we rated Mario Kart tracks and which ones we'd like to see Formula One cars on. So if you want to go check that out, it's one of the best episodes we did. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Oh yeah, that was a fun one, filming that one. Absolutely, I'm a massive Mario Kart nerd. I do take it as seriously as anyone can take Mario Kart. So translating it into Formula One podcast, it was a dream episode for me. Rachel, I've mentioned that you are part of the Paddock Pals team. What is that, and where can people find it?
Yeah, so it's a podcast with me and my cousin. We talk all things F1 and also some F1 personal lives, girlfriends, celebrities at the races. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Music and other podcast platforms. And then also on the socials, I think it's just like at Paddock Pals Podcast. I don't know. My cousin's a lot better at the social media than I am. So he posts a lot and he posts some great stuff. So shout out to him for posting so much. But yeah, that's where you can find us.
Yeah, definitely check out Rachel and Warren's show. It's always a good listen. And Phil, I mentioned that you are part of the Grip Strip team as well. Same question to you. What is that? What is that, and where can people find it?
Yeah, the Grip Strip podcast. We're at close to 200. We'll be doing episode 190 this week. Myself and Joshua Fine will be talking about all things motorsports. You can find us at Grip Strip Pod on X, and Philip G. Mathew is my blog site. You can find the show there. We're on Podbean. We talk about motorsports in the U.S. and worldwide. We'll talk about this race, and we'll talk about any of the other news that has come from this weekend. But we'll also be talking about the Charlotte Roval that's going on live as we're doing this recap of the Qatar Grand Prix and more on this week's episode of the GSP. And as always, thanks, George, for hosting, and great to be on with Jonah and Rachel and the whole crew here. I always enjoy being on the Grid Talk podcast.
Absolutely.
And thanks to Aiden.
Yeah, Aiden with the production, of course, as always. Yeah, and great having you on, Phil, as always. Thank you for making the time for this. If you want to check out more from Grid Talk, you can head over to our YouTube channel where most episodes are recorded live, just like this one, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search for F1 Grid Talk and all of those to go through our big back catalogue of shows. Over 300 episodes now, which cover previews, qualifying reviews, sprint reviews, race results, and everything in between. Please consider going over to our Patreon as well so we can get better lights, mics, and recording equipment. It's getting darker now in the UK for these winter Grand Prix. They're on quite early, quite late in the day as well. So yeah, help us out with that one. And yeah, we'll be back at the weekend to preview the United States Grand Prix. Thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.